Hi and welcome to my cutting garden in Shropshire. If you don't know me, I am in my second year of growing cut flowers for my home. So I'm doing my best learning what flowers work for me, how to grow them, what works and what doesn't, so you can follow me on my highs and lows throughout this growing process. Today we are in mid-June and I've got too much flowers of the same type to make arrangements, or my vases are full. And so I decided that I will make some dried flowers. Now I tried this last year and with great success, so I want to see what else can dry and make sure I get enough colour in them as possible. So if you're interested in dried flowers, then stay tuned and come follow me round and see what I do. So in my cutting patch I have grown some specific flowers for drying. So the blue cornflower that you see beside me has been grown specifically for dried flowers because the colour stays pretty well when it's dried. So that's a nice bright blue that will be added to an arrangement later in the year. Some things just turn brown, as you can imagine dry flowers would. So some are not that great for for drying. Some I don't know. So I have a lot of Sweet William. So I have a lot of Sweet William, and I've never dried this before. I've never grown it before, so I honestly do not know what it will end up like, but it's in such bright colours now that I kind of think, well, even if it fades a little, it could still be quite nice. So I'm going to see whether that will dry. And then I have some grasses that need to be picked, which are quite windy here. Bunny tail grasses, which are quite shorter than I was expecting. So I'm going to dry those. You don't need long stems if you're wanting to do something with the dried flowers, like making a wreath or something. So you don't need a really long stem. So they will be fine for that. But if I wanted to make an arrangement that is in a vase, then it may not be such a great thing. So I will be picking those. I will also be picking some feverfew, which if we look over there, I've got quite a lot growing. And the same is true for the achillea, which is next to it, which are kind of pinky colours. And I'm led to believe that those will retain the colour as well in drying. So I'm going to cut those, and I think that's pretty much it. I have got some calendula or marigolds growing in the greenhouse. That's self-seeded, I didn't plant those. And I tried drying those last year, and whilst the colour does remain really quite well, whatever technique I used, whether it was hanging it upside down or through a mesh and having the flower upright, the flower head didn't stay strong enough to be able to use later, so the petals just ended up dropping quite easily in once you try to use it. So I'm not going to be trying that again, but I think that's enough for a while. Now drying flowers takes a bit of time, so you have to pick the flowers when they are at their best. So if you were picking some flowers, sometimes you pick them before they become full bloom because they will open further in a vase, but not so with dried flowers. You want it to be at their peak because they're not going to be in water to then continue to grow. So you want them to be at their best when you're picking them, and then they retain that as they dry out. Now the colours will fade and they will be much more muted generally, but you need to pick them at their best. So the wallflowers have been flowering for some time, so I just thought they surely can't last for much longer. They've been about 3 weeks, so surely they can't last much longer. So I'm going to take advantage of them being there now and do those. And as I say, we need to sort out the staking issue that I've got going on over there, so I'll be doing that. Now, drying flowers takes a bit of technique. You need to process the flowers slightly differently to if you're picking them from a vase. Now, if you're picking them from a vase, then you want to strip away the leaves that are going to be in the water, because that can cause fungi or dirty water or whatever you want to call it, bacteria in the water, which makes your flowers not last as long. From a drying perspective, you want to remove the flowers because you want to avoid moisture. So the leaves retain moisture. So if you remove those leaves, then the flowers will dry out quicker, and then you avoid mould growing on them. So we need to strip off all of the leaves off all of the flowers and hang them up. Wrap them into small bunches, hang them up, and ready to dry. So my first job is to pick them, and then I'll have a relaxing sit down, stripping all of the leaves from the flowers. So let me get started doing that now. So I've picked the achillea and the feverfew for the time being, and now I'm just going to strip it of the leaves. So it's literally just a case of stripping it down and getting rid of every leaf. So those are, you can see they're just little flowers that haven't come to anything yet, so I can get rid of those. There we go. Now in reality I don't need a length that long, so I'm going to half that. I need something that's going to be useful for hanging it up with, so enough length for that, but other than that nothing more. So we've got that. So let me put that up the top and carry on with everything else. This could take some time, so it's nice to be comfortable while you're doing it. It doesn't need to be perfect with the leaves. You can leave a few in there still. However, you do need to get the bulk out of the way and provide enough to dry properly. So some of these, when they're single stems, it's just a quick strip down and all is well. But when they're more multi-stemmed, it becomes more challenging. Final few. That's the achillea done. Now on to the feverfew. This hopefully will be slightly easier because the stripping of the flowers should just be really quite quick. And actually it's more important that these leaves are stripped off because they are more, there's more of them, if you know what I mean. So the leaves are bigger and hold more water and therefore can cause more mould. So we need to make sure that this is stripped as well as we can. So I've finished the feverfew and the achillea. Didn't take too long in the end, and as you can see, the big pile that you think you have goes down quite a lot once you've stripped off all of the leaves and the non-flowering stems. So and equally, when you make floral dried flower arrangements, so if you're wanting to do something like making a wreath or something like that, it's surprising how many flowers you need. So it's always useful to have more than you think, and so I've got quite a nice pile there that'll keep me going for a little while. I'm just going to pick the sweet williams now and maybe the grass, the bunny tail grass, and then I will call it a day. I'll bunch it together and then call it a day. I will come back to you once I get to the bunching up process. So here we have it, the achillea, feverfew and sweet william and the bunny tail grass all ready to be put into bunches and hung up. Sweet william is going to be interesting to dry because it's quite a chunky flower head. This pink one was a fine example. Now they break up into smaller ones, so a smaller one like that. Now that should dry fine, although you'll notice it's really lots of clusters, with quite short stems, so I'm not sure how well this is going to dry. And then when you've got it into the bigger bunch, then you know there's more in there to dry. It looks a bit like a hydrangea, and the hydrangea you tend to dry upright rather than down, and I can't remember the reason why. So maybe I will try that in a vase somewhere and just leave it and see what happens. But the rest I'm going to bunch up into rough, I was going to say 10 stems, but 10 stems of the sweet william is going to be too much, whereas 10 stems of the achillea may be not enough. So I'll bunch it so that I get a reasonable amount together, tie them up and then hang them up. So what I do to bunch them is get a length of string, half it so you've got a loop this end. Let's just grab, so that's probably enough of the feverfew, which actually is only 4 stems, although they have got multiple stems. Actually there's a little one there, so maybe 5 stems. But so you get your bunch. I'm going to leave it loose like that. Then slot the two ends together, making a tight loop. Then separate out the two ends and tie it in a knot. Tie it in a knot so that it stays tight. Now you can tie it as tight as you can, because they will shrink when they dry, so that they can become loose and then they don't stay in their bunches. So it's better if you can get them really tight in the first place. I then, to make it easier for storage, again, I would trim the ends off so that they're all the same length. And there we have it, one bunch ready to be hung. So let me carry on and get them dried, get them strung up in a bunch. And there we have it, everything all bunched up, ready to be hung up in the barn. It has had the ends tied off because I'm going to hang it from a pole upside down. So that's how I've done it. The easiest way to dry them is hanging them upside down. To keep as much colour as you can, you want it to be in a darkened room if possible. If you want them to be bleached, then put them in light, hang them up against a window, and they will bleach out so they're really pale. But in this instance, I want to keep as much colour as I can, so I'm going to hang them in the barn. Now, the area that you hang them has to be cool and dry, obviously, and ideally airy, so that they can get a lot of air around them to dry them off quickly and easily. So I've got a barn, but you can hang them inside, down staircases, whatever suits you and your house, but you just don't want to be hanging them somewhere humid. So not in a bathroom, probably not in a kitchen, although that does get warm, so that might help, but not really anywhere that's going to have a lot of moisture in the air. So that's the flowers. The bunnytail grass is just, I'm just going to leave it like this and see how it dries. So I'm going to leave it on a table and just leave it to dry out like that and see how that goes, because the stems are just too thin to tie anything up. So let's go and hang up and get the finished product. And there we have it, the first drying bunches of the season. There's some old cornflowers that I'd picked just slightly earlier, but the rest have all been picked today and hung up ready to dry. And I would expect those to be dry within about a month, because it's really quite warm. So we should be ready to pack them away for winter, for the winter craft projects come a month's time, by which point there's probably going to be more hanging up there in the rafters ready to dry. So if you have a surplus of flowers that you're not quite sure what to do with, then give drying a go. You'll be pleasantly surprised by the results. I know I was last year. And it'll give you something to do in the winter when there's no gardening to be done. So try out anything, really try out anything. You never know. If you've got surplus, then it doesn't matter whether it fails, but it might work and it might be something rather wonderful. So until next time, happy growing.